Hello friends, today I am going to explain about a mystery movie, The Water Horse. This movie is about a boy's discovery of a mysterious blue egg unravels an extraordinary bond with a mythical sea creatures. The movie begins with a boy named Ong, who lives by the sea with his mother, Annie, and his sister, Christy. One day, Annie told Ong to go swimming, but he chose to sit quietly on the beach instead. While sitting there, he noticed something shiny in the water. It was a large egg, half submerged in the sea. Curious, he pulled it out and began examining it. Just then, Annie called him to come home. Not wanting to lose the egg, Ong hid it in his bucket and followed his mother. As they walked home, Annie scolded him for not swimming as she had asked. Ong remained silent, holding his bucket tightly. Once they reached home, Ong rushed to his father's old workshop. His father, Charlie, was a soldier who had gone to fight in the war, and the workshop was filled with his tools and memories. Ong often spent time there, thinking about his father. He placed the mysterious egg on the workbench and stared at it, wondering what it could be. Later, Christy came home and asked Annie what Ong had done at the beach. Annie replied that he'd just sat alone as usual. Meanwhile, Ong carefully washed the egg and peeled off its outer layer. To his amazement, the egg was bright blue underneath. Before he could examine it further, Annie called him for dinner, so he left the egg in the workshop and went inside. That night, it started raining heavily. Ong grew worried about the egg. He ran to the workshop in the rain, only to find that the egg had cracked open. He looked around and spotted a strange, small creature. It had tiny fins and looked unlike anything he'd ever seen. When Ong tried to touch it, the creature snapped at him. Realizing it might be hungry, Ong hurried to get some food. The creature calmed down once it was fed, and Ong decided to name it Cruso. However, Annie's voice called again, so Ong reluctantly left Cruso and went to bed. The next morning, a group of soldiers arrived at their house, led by Captain Hamilton. He explained that enemy forces might attack through the sea, so his team would stay at their house to prepare. Annie agreed, and the soldiers began setting up their base. Ong, meanwhile, sneaked away to check on Cruso. He noticed the creature had grown overnight. To keep Cruso happy, he filled a tub with water for it to swim in. During this time, Ong's workshop had a new visitor, a man named Louis, who came asking for work. Annie told him he could stay if he cleaned the workshop. While cleaning, Louis accidentally found Cruso's tub. Ong panicked and tried to stop him, but Cruso had already escaped into the house. The family dog, Churchill, chased Cruso into the bathroom. Christy stumbled upon the creature and screamed in fright. Ong quickly calmed her down, explaining that Cruso was his pet and wouldn't harm anyone. Christy reluctantly promised to keep it a secret from Annie. Later, Annie gave Louis some of Charlie's old clothes to wear. When Louis asked if Charlie would return, Annie sadly admitted that he had died when his ship sank during the war. She hadn't told Ong yet, as she couldn't bear to break his heart. When Louis tried to fix a leak in the bathroom, he found Cruso. Shocked, he listened as Ong explained the creature's story. Louis identified Cruso as a rare seahorse, a mythical creature said to have magical powers. Ong begged Louis to help hide Cruso from Annie. Louis agreed, and they managed to keep Cruso hidden. That night, Louis suggested they release Cruso back into the sea, as it didn't belong on land. But Ong refused, insisting Cruso was his friend. During dinner with the soldiers, Cruso escaped again, causing chaos in the house. He ruined the dinner table and fled outside, with Churchill hot on his trail. Cruso eventually found a fountain to hide in, while Ong and Louis searched for him. They finally found Cruso, who had grown even bigger. Realizing it was time to let Cruso return to his natural habitat, they loaded him onto a truck and drove to the sea. Ong tearfully said goodbye as Cruso swam away. A few days later, two fishermen, Jimmy and Hugh, encountered Cruso while fishing. Hugh wanted to capture the creature to make money, but Cruso's immense strength nearly sank their boat. They narrowly escaped, and Jimmy, amazed by what he had seen, told a reporter named Jock about the strange sea creature. Jock spread the news, attracting attention from locals and outsiders alike. Back at home, Captain Hamilton encouraged Ong to start training with the soldiers. But Ong was bored and missed Cruso. One day, he sneaked out to the sea and called for his friend. To his surprise, Cruso appeared, now fully grown and massive. Cruso took Ong on an exhilarating ride across the waves. After their adventure, Cruso brought Ong back to shore, but their reunion was short-lived. Strunk, the army cook, spotted Cruso and alerted the soldiers. They mistook the creature for a threat and prepared to attack. Ong and Christy tried to stop them, but their warnings were ignored. Cruso narrowly escaped the soldiers' weapons, but the commotion drew more attention to him. Meanwhile, Jimmy and Jock used a fake model of Cruso to stir up excitement in the media. The situation escalated when Strunk and his men set out to capture Cruso. Ong, Christy, and Lewis followed, hoping to protect their friend. They found Cruso, but he had become wild and aggressive after being hunted. Ong tried to calm him, but Cruso didn't recognize him. Just as Strunk's team prepared to attack, Cruso retaliated, flipping their boat and disappearing into the water. Captain Hamilton, believing enemy forces were involved, mobilized the soldiers for a full-scale attack. Annie, worried for Aang's safety, insisted on going with Hamilton to the shore. Aang managed to find Cruso again and climbed onto his back, guiding him away from danger. But the soldiers had set a net in the water, trapping Cruso. Aang tearfully said goodbye to his friend before jumping to safety. With a mighty leap, Cruso broke free of the net and disappeared into the ocean. Back on shore, Aang reunited with his family. Annie finally understood that Cruso was real and not just a figment of Aang's imagination. Although sad to part with Cruso, Aang was happy knowing his friend was safe and free. Cruso's legend lived on, and Aang cherished the unforgettable bond they had shared. So friends, that's all for today's video. See you in the next video. Subscribe for more videos like this and turn on the notification, and leave a like to help the channel out. Thanks for watching.